part 9, some optional things that we can do. And if we double click on our scenario properties, we have the rating at 1, which is easy. So we can do a few other things to make it even easier. If you press the 9 key, bring up the 2D map, here we are down at the Vinland, receiving where the end of our scenario is going to be. And this is showing you the switch. See, when I highlighted, you get the same switch icon as when you're in the game. But it's this blue line is showing you that it's set against where we want to go. So if you click it, now the blue is over here, then the engineer or driver will not have to do that himself. You right click and you can get back out of here, out of there. And when you save the scenario, all of the things that you did on the 9 map in here will be saved. And before I tested the last additions that we did and didn't like how a few things worked out, our very second AI train that we meet at the crossover at Vinland still isn't at the right time for me. So I already changed it to 9:14 start time from 9:12, so I extended it 2 more minutes just to make sure that we're going to have to stop there. And the local switcher down in New Wadsworth, I changed its start time to 9:11. I made it I didn't do it. Okay, so I have to do that. That was in my plans and I oversaw it. So I want this to start earlier, and I'm changing it to 09. Because this is the 6th times already that I've driven this scenario, so I'm getting pretty good, and I'm really at line speed when I hit here. And at the time that I did at that maximum line speed, the train was just barely into this bend. So I set its start time back 2 extra minutes, which I'm hoping will put it so that it's backing into its siding here as we go zooming by at 55 miles an hour. And that's the reasoning for that. And then the oil train at Element at my 55 mile an hour speed, it was just barely starting. So I changed its time to 9:04. I put it back 2 more minutes from the original 9:06 that I had it at. And now for some of the optional things we can do. I want to select our train, the player. We could zoom to it. Don't really have to, but just ensures that we have it. And we just have a few little commands that we're doing. A waypoint that waypoints do not show up anywhere in the HUD. You don't even know you're going there. So actually, It's just to help you guide the path, and it works best for AIs. But what we can do is use another function called a trigger. It's labeled as trigger instruction, and we can put it in. And what I like to do is put one at the very beginning of the scenario, and it's set on time. This box here is asking you for a duration. What it actually wants to know is when you want it to trigger. And I like to make a welcome message. I give it about 7 seconds, because it's going to start 7 seconds after the scenario starts, which is 9. So at 9 o'clock and 7 seconds, this window will pop up, and you get to put a message. And I like to have a little interaction and pretend that there's somebody else there with you, like the conductor, and make up a script. So I just type in a little information as if I were the conductor talking to the engineer, telling him we're going to take a load of hoppers down to Vinland. Some pleasantries, looks like a nice day, and then I tell him let's get going. And if you were in a game, this would be popped up and displayed, and you'd get a little X window. You could shut it off and get it out of your way, but it's just a nicety. And like I said, these triggers, this one will start at 7 seconds from the last event. Now, since there were no events except for the actual starting of the scenario, then it works in 7 seconds. There's 2 other boxes here, actually 3, but only 2 of them work. Trigger train stop and trigger wheel slip. And this one here, well, it used to say trigger animation, but they're things that RSC is working on, that they're going to give us eventually, or they may actually work. This trigger train stop, possibly if you said it, it would stop the train, but I don't see any way to make it work that way. So I just use it for pop-up messages. And I usually like to do it the very first thing, and it gives the engineer just another quickie idea of what's going on in a scenario. And then other things you can do, if we go down the track, we already know that this signal is going to be a yellow because of the AI coming from Henderson. So if I go back, we find a destination marker, like this one here in New Wadsworth. Now we have to see where to place it too. Okay, New Wadsworth, there's Element. So we want it after the flag at Element and before Vinland. So we have another option here called Stop at Destinations Instruction. And like I said, I don't want it there. It always is going to, the newest one will always pop up in front of your final destination. So you check it, use the arrow keys, and everything is all out of whack because it's waiting for this instruction. And we're going to pick New Wadsworth. Main line eastbound. Now, when this defaults open, as you see here, you have a speed, and it defaults to 0. So that means that you have to stop at this destination. Well, we don't want to stop. So if you just highlight it and you put a 1 in there, now instead of being a stop at, it's a go via, and that's what displays on your HUD. So you'll be seeing a go via New Wadsworth Main Line eastbound as one of your next designations as we're coming down the track. And we can enter a message. And we're coming up on a yellow light here. This signal here is going to be yellow over red. So I can say that it would be coming from dispatch. Okay, so I typed in a message that possibly the dispatcher would be warning us about the train that's going to be meeting us around the crossover. And this will pop up, and it gives the engineer the feeling that someone's talking to him. Now this stop at, or go via, as we turned it into by changing the speed, let me say this, if we did leave it at 0, over here is a duration. So if you wanted somebody to stop for X amount of time, then you would put that value in here. So if you changed it to 1 and had it be 1 minute, on the HUD the little bar graph would come over with the red bar and the circle, and it would take 1 minute, and then you would be able to proceed. So it's another way of controlling the player. But since we changed it to 1, all it wants us to do is be going at least 1 mile an hour when we cross over the destination marker where we're putting this stop at go via. Okay, so we got the dispatcher, he's telling us about the train. And if you wanted to, most pop-ups will last about 25 to 30 seconds. So you could add a trigger use a trigger and say set it for 35 seconds. And have it as if the conductor was replying back to the dispatcher. But if you close the window early, it's still going to take the 35 seconds before the window pops up. And just pretend we made some conversation with the dispatcher, which will come in 35 seconds after we hit the new Wadsworth main line destination marker back here before the signal. In New Wadsworth. Then one final thing that we could do is go to Vinland. And there's a destination marker at Vinland Ethanol. And we could put another stop ad in. Move it up. Because we're going to hit it before we hit the receiving. And get Vinland Ethanol. Change it to 1 mile an hour. Because we're not going to stop, we just want to pass through and get a message. And the conductor is going to warn us that it is a 5% grade to go down into Vinland. If you ran the scenario, you know this, but a guy never running it might want to know it. As I said, these are optional things you can do. And since we made the scenario as easy, which I had the easy stuff too. If you wanted to go with a harder setting, you could leave the messages out and make him throw his own switches and everything else. And that's about it. All that's left now is to save it. And run it one more time to test it to make sure. And after that, we pretty much have a completed scenario that we could package up and give to someone or post it to the website. And we'll call that the end.